Sad Boy here, and today we're talking about Strange Darling. I actually saw this movie when it first came out in theaters, but I just never really had the time to get around to making the video. Never had a chance to really write up my review. So finally getting to it, but unfortunately I am still sick, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to speak during this. Strange Darling is a cat and mouse kind of like thriller chase movie, and it's really focused on two characters primarily: the lady, who is played by Willa Fitzgerald, and the demon, who is played by Kyle Gallner. The movie's about a serial killer's rampage through the countryside, which leaves multiple people dead. Surprisingly, this movie didn't really make a lot of money, but it was really well received and got overwhelmingly positive reviews. And I can see why it was so positively received, because pretty much every aspect of this movie is solid. The characters are well played. They're left a little bit flat. There's not a lot of building. It's just because you're kind of thrown into the events. There's not a lot of chance to really grow who they are, but it works for what it is. There's not a lot of character development other than the lady, which makes sense. It's not really that kind of a movie where you really see relationships build. Willa Fitzgerald did a great job with this character, and it was easily one of her best performances. But the other characters delivered as much as they needed to. I mean, every performance was very good. There was no one in the movie that did a bad job. Nothing really stood out as being a negative in terms of performances. But just compared to her, she went really hard. The movie shot really well, looks good. Lighting, sets, everything looked nice. The use of music was interesting. They did kind of some interesting things with the way it was synced up to the events of the movie, which was kind of a fun detail. It seemed like they really cared to use the score of the film to kind of highlight the action on the screen. The setting allows for you to really get into the movie a little bit more, and kind of makes the whole thing feel more believable, because it's some really over-the-top violence happening in very public settings. So being out in the isolated country kind of allows for you to not really worry about details about why aren't other people getting involved, where are the cops, things like that. The movie is told in chapters, which are shown out of order. Normally not the biggest fan of the whole Tarantino non-linear thing. I think that really has to add something to the story, but with this one, it did. It allowed them to kind of shift stakes a little bit to show the viewer that maybe you don't understand the situation as well as you thought you did. And during something like a cat and mouse chase, it's kind of good to have something in there to introduce new ideas as it's going on, because if the whole movie is just the chase, I could see it going kind of flat after a while, no matter how much violence you pump into it. I also really liked the use of color and lighting. They did some really interesting lighting effects, very heavy use of the color red, which created kind of this unsettling vibe. The color red is present throughout the whole movie. You'll constantly see it on screen, and it felt very intentional. I feel like there was some kind of meaning behind it. I would really like to go back and see the movie again and see if I could kind of figure out a little bit more of what they were going for with that. But you could tell there was definitely some kind of meaning, some kind of purpose to the use of the color red, the way they had it. And then, kind of contrast in the beginning, there was a lot of heavy blue lighting. So I'm curious about, kind of what it meant. And I think that if I was to kind of talk about what I think it means, it would kind of give away some of the movie, and I'd rather not ruin it. I think this is a movie it's better to know as little as possible going into it. There was really one thing in the movie that I didn't like, and I mean, looking back at it, there was really only one thing in the movie that I didn't like. But it did kind of take me out of it a little bit, was they did this whole attempt at comedic relief, I guess is what you would call it. They tried to kind of inject a little bit of humor, and I just think with the overall tone of the movie, it was just weird. It felt like to me, it felt like it was from another script, and they liked it and they wanted to put it in. The people I was with liked it though. They thought it worked. They thought it was funny. They enjoyed having that little kind of tone shift in it. So, I could be wrong. Maybe you would like it more than I would. But for me, it just kind of took me out of it, without giving anything away, essentially they introduce these two characters that are old hippies living in the woods. They believe in Bigfoot, and they make a breakfast with too much butter, and that's like really it. That's like the joke. And I mean, it did kind of get me a little bit, where I was just like, ugh, like watching them cook it, and then it was gross. Like, I'll give them that, and it's not gross in like a disgusting way. It's just like, oh my god, I would like these people. It's like two people sharing a breakfast, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they use about 6 sticks of butter for their breakfast. So it's like, I don't know, take that joke as well as you can. I don't know. It didn't hit for me, but other people in the theater liked it. But for me, it just didn't work with the tone. And it felt like they kind of reminded me that I was watching a movie. It just pulled me out of this, this suspense and this tension that they had built up really well. Like, it was really well moving action. You could feel stress and from the characters, and it kind of, you just keep feeling like this character's so close to death, and then there's this big long delay of the violence, the chase, which didn't make total sense to me. Also, just like timing wise of where the characters were to each other, how they had time for this whole scene. And then, yeah, I don't know, it's like you pulled me out of what was going on to make a joke that I just didn't think was great. I don't know. Other people liked it, so maybe other people are right. But yeah, I mean, that was like the one negative thing. It was just like one small thing that I didn't like. I thought was kind of dumb, but otherwise, like, overall, a really good movie. It was very different than other movies I've seen. It was a fun cat and mouse. It was actually a suspenseful thriller. I normally don't really get the feeling of like tension and suspense and like, oh god, like, is that person gonna get that other person kind of thing going on? But yeah, no, I was into it. It was really cool. It was well done, and yeah, Willa Fitzgerald just absolutely killed it. Like, she was really good. Unfortunately, because of the genre, I don't know, what kind of award she could potentially get for it, but like, she went hard. It was a really impressive performance. So there's like one weird criticism that this movie got, and I did just want to talk about it for like a minute, but it's kind of hard to talk about the criticism without giving away like essentially the big twist of the movie. So I'm just gonna like wrap up the review right here, being like, this is definitely worth watching. I plan to see it again. I would love to watch this movie again, easily at least one more time. I think you should watch it. I think you'll enjoy it. It's probably one of the better movies to come out this year so far. If you like violence, which isn't like gratuitous or like grotesque, it's just kind of real. And if you like, suspense, go for it. And yeah, if you want to just see like a really, really good performance from Willa Fitzgerald, she really did a great job. So yeah, if I was rating the movie, I'd give it 4 out of 5. I'm gonna start doing this now at the end of the videos, where I'm gonna give it a number out of 5, because that's what my friends and I do after we watch it. We kind of rate it and then discuss like why we did that. So if you want to hear me talk about like why this one criticism that I kind of saw in multiple places online, why I think it's wrong, stick around, but like, it's gonna kind of spoil the movie a little bit. So this movie attracted a really weird kind of critique, and I was kind of shocked when I saw it, because I was like, I don't really know where that could have come from. In my opinion, like, I get, like, with the scenes that they outlined and explained why they perceived it this way, it's like, it's one of those ones where it's like, I can get why if you had to make that criticism you could, but I don't know why you would kind of choose to make it. So people make the claim that this movie is anti-woman, that it has some very strong anti-feminist tone and vibe to it, which I disagree with strongly. The lady, Willa Fitzgerald's character, is like by far the most powerful and competent character in the entire movie. So to kind of give up the twist, she is the serial killer. The demon, Kyle Gallner, is actually a cop. They do this whole thing where they set it up like, he's the serial killer pursuing her. It looks like he's the one going on the bloody rampage targeting her. But actually, he was going to be one of her victims. They were hooking up. She drugged him. She was going to murder him. He managed to pull a gun. She ran. He decided to pursue her. And yeah, and so she's hyper manipulative, and she goes into like this kind of feral, instinctual, like self-preservation state where she's kind of just doing things. Her goal is just to be able to take one more step, right? Like, so she starts randomly killing people to get like cars, clothes, because she's not really clothes. She's pretty much all naked from the hotel room where they were together. So she stabs some random person in the neck in the hotel, and then steals another person's car, and then the old hippie couple. She stabs one of the old hippie couple because they were going to call the cops, and she doesn't want to deal with the cops. And that's kind of like the twist that they do with this whole non-linear storytelling thing. It's like, oh, it was actually her. It wasn't the most well disguised twist, but I think the better twists in movies aren't really well disguised. It shouldn't be hidden. It should kind of be out there where you could be like, oh, maybe that's what's going on. My wife actually picked up on it really early in the movie. I forget what it was, but I think she knew like 10, I mean, maybe even like one of the opening scenes. Like it was pretty quickly in. She was just like, oh, I think she's actually the killer. It might have actually been like the opening scene. She just kind of pieced it together with this like one article of clothing. And so yeah, they do this whole reveal, and so you find out like she's trying to flee from this guy because like he has guns, and he's trying to kill her for trying to kill him. And she kind of keeps pulling people in. She's really good at manipulating people. She kills people when she has to. She does what she has to do to survive. She goes into full, like, just animal survival mode, which, like, she even kind of addresses at a few points. She kind of... Yeah, so she kind of even says to people in it where it's just like, hey, like, I'm in survival mode right now. Like, she is... whatever comes tomorrow doesn't matter as long as she gets to see tomorrow. It's kind of like her thing. It's this very like animal mentality, and she just plays it so well. Like, it was just so entertaining to watch her do like this like seductive attitude, this like flirty, playful attitude. Like she does some not exactly comedy. I mean, like her joking around the character in the beginning where it's like, she's delivering humor somewhat well. Like when she goes and just like into like her psycho mode and is doing violent shit, like you really believe that too. Then there's like a scene with some cops where she like manipulates them also, and she kind of uses being a woman and like a smaller, more slender woman kind of like as a weapon. It sort of kind of disarms people a little bit. And so there's this whole scene where the cops show up to this like farmhouse, and like and she's the one who's killed everyone there, but she's the only one left. And so she kind of stages it where she was I don't know with like YouTube like what you're even allowed to say anymore, but like she stages it where essentially she was like sexually assaulted by the cop, and that she's the victim, he killed everyone, and she kind of manipulates this one cop who's a woman also. And then there's like a male cop who's like arguing with her, and the woman cop's like, no, we're gonna help her, look, she's obviously the victim. So they kind of like ignore protocol and they help her, and then she pulls a gun, and while she's in the back of the cruiser, she has both of them just like dead to rights, and she confesses like, I'm the electric lady killer. Like, she's like a known serial killer. And yeah, it was just it was an interesting like twist. It again wasn't super like well hidden or anything like that, but it was entertaining. It was really good, and she like kills it. She kills this character so hard. And people started doing this whole critique online that she's like, this movie is anti-woman because she does like false allegations, and it's like, yeah, dude, she's manipulating the cops. Like, what do you want? It's like, this isn't some like women lie kind of thing, which is literally what people are saying. They're like, this movie pushes a narrative of like, women lie, women aren't trustworthy, women are just as dangerous as men. See, like, they talk about how like at the beginning she gives this whole talk to him about how like, you know, one night stands, like anonymous sex with a stranger is like really dangerous for a woman. And they're kind of saying this whole thing where it's like, but she's actually the predator, and like, and people just like ran with this online. I was surprised at how many people I found online that did this and talked about it. Reddit especially, there's people that listed out like so many different parts of the movie as being this like kind of like anti-feminist thing. I have it open here actually. Yeah, pretty much this person online, and it got like a lot of feedback, and there's a lot of people saying the same thing too. But it just feels like false allegations, crazy woman, men are the real victim, and it's just like, this is so shocking, and I can't believe everyone loved it because this is like such a bad message, and blah blah blah. And I mean, there's a lot of people, and I just think that that's like a really lazy review to be like, any depiction of the woman as anything other than the victim is somehow anti-feminist. And to say that this like monstrous person like used a false allegation to like save herself is somehow saying like women lie, and it's like anti-Me Too statement. That's just kind of dumb. That's just, honestly, it's a dumb opinion. It's not. I don't see how this movie is like anti-woman. In multiple scenes, the most compassionate characters are women. Everything from the hotel to the house with the hippies, to the police, the female officer that was deceived by her. They're the most compassionate ones. Also, at the end of the movie, there's another character, another woman who has like a pretty short part in the movie, but she does some stuff. And yeah, it's like, I'm a fan of like the feminist perspective for critiquing art, especially film. I think that the feminist perspective is a really interesting way to evaluate art. I think it's very valid. I think that it's even entertaining, like being a guy and hearing kind of what the perception is through that other lens. It's it's like informative, and it's educational, but it's also interesting. It puts a light on something that I personally just kind of can't. And so I think that that's like a valid form of criticism, but I think that this is like a very misplaced use of the feminist perspective to really gender this whole thing. To really gender the whole thing just felt weird, felt out of place. It felt kind of like reaching, even like this one person online who like did this post. They talk about like, oh, like I hate to be, the feminist ruining everyone's fun. And it's just like, well, then just don't be that. Like, don't be an annoying feminist ruining everyone's fun. And I say this as a person who like supports women, supports the feminist perspective for evaluating art. In college, I was actually, for a short period of time, the president of a feminist club. I'm not anti-feminism, but I am just anti-annoying person with divisive opinions. And it's just one of those ones that like this criticism of this character, and the more of the message of the movie, not even of the character, it's like, it reminds me of when Kill Bill came out, and there are a bunch of women who kind of had the same thing, where it was like, this is bad for women, it's a bad way to portray us. Like, this is bad for women, it's a bad way to portray us. And like, oh, great, so like we're the victims now. And it's like, in Kill Bill, like, she massacres people for like hurting her and taking her daughter. I mean, it's the most empowering. I mean, Quentin Tarantino actually said that in an argument where he was like, this is an extremely empowering movie. Like, how is this in any way making you the weak victim? Like, you're getting even. And with this, I just feel like to see this character and be like, oh, great, that's what all women are like. It's like, dude, she is a deeply troubled, like, monster. She's barely a human. Like, she's a psychopath to the point where it's like, yeah, there's like nothing in there. Like, this is, I mean, when she goes through the whole series of the movie, it's like she is like an animal in this like state of survival. But in her life before this, she is a fucking serial killer. She's a bad, manipulative person. She lures people in with sexuality, I guess, typically. I guess that's like normally what she does. I don't think they get too much into her crimes before the movie, but like this movie takes place where like essentially she seduces a man and then goes to kill him. Like to look at that character and be like, oh yeah, great, like this is supposed to be what all women are like. Do you think like men are all so stupid that watching this movie we're like, pff, typical woman? When you see her like carving shit into a guy's chest, like we know that's not all women. You know, it's not all women are like that. And so just to like have a character, I mean, even just part of the criticism be like, oh wow, crazy woman, yeah, lunatic, she's an absolute lunatic. I don't think all women are that character. And yeah, and then you know to be like, oh, men are going to use this to be like, oh, see, she gave that speech in the beginning, but she's the one that's dangerous to men. Yeah, sometimes, like sometimes that happens. There are real serial killers that are women, and they target all different kinds of people, sometimes men. There's some really famous examples of that. And oh god, what's the one? Um, ba, 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 ba. Okay, I mean, this is kind of perfect that I literally just Googled female serial killer, and it looks like yesterday a Canadian woman is being charged with being a serial killer. Okay, so like there you go. So there's a woman that's a serial killer there. Um, oh god, I'm so bad at saying her name. Aileen Wuornos. So she's like the really famous one. She would do essentially she would like pose as like a prostitute and then kill men. Pretty similar thing. And then something that I always thought was really interesting was actually I was a psychology major in undergrad, and you know, like all psychology majors, I took a big interest in serial killers. I thought they were interesting. I had no interest in working with like criminals in any way, but I did think the concept of like profiling is really interesting because the branch of psychology that I studied, personalities profiles are a big thing that you would build out. And what's interesting is there's a whole thing in like forensic psychology and like criminal clinical psychology where they think that there's the chance that many of the serial killers that haven't been caught in the last like 30, 40 years or so, it's probably because they were only looking for men. And they actually actively ignored women as suspects. They were just like, nah, like it's got to be a guy, because that's what the earliest concepts of like profiling a serial killer were. It was white men specifically. And yeah, I mean, white men do seem to be the majority of serial killers, but that can also be kind of like a bit of a confirmation bias coming from the fact that we really only look for white men as serial killers. If you saw that show Mindhunter, it's kind of about, I think it's like loosely based on the FBI agents that like first use psychology to create this concept of profiling to find killers. And it's really dangerous to like gender the concept of like a dangerous person, a mentally ill person. Like mental illness exists, you know, regardless of your gender or sex or orientation or race or anything like that. And these tendencies have nothing to do with those things. You know, it's so environmental, like anyone can be kind of turned into that. And I don't really like want to go off on this whole tangent about that, but it's just like, what a fucking stupid thing to see a movie where there's a female serial killer and be like, oh, I got it, you're saying all women are crazy and men are the victims? Yeah, I mean, the guy is the victim in that movie. She's carving words into his chest after drugging him. I don't know. Yeah, it's just dumb. That's just such a dumb opinion. But anyway, yeah, just a bad criticism to say that this movie is some very like pro-man, anti-Me Too, anti-woman thing, saying all women are crazy and men are victims and women make up false allegations and stuff like that. Like, That's just a really bad take. That's just such a bad take on this movie. I don't know how you have to like search out that kind of a take, in my opinion. Um, yeah, I don't know. So that's the end of it. Yeah, going back to what I said before, movies 4 out of 5. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to talk about that criticism because I just came across it like 30 minutes before making this video, and it just really irked me. I just felt like I really wanted to say something about it. But yeah, anyway, this movie 4 out of 5.